I'm Don Dickson. I want to thank you for joining me again today. We're in the middle of a discussion on structure brakes and brake lines. We've just sort of begun the last couple times we talked. We're sort of zeroing in on these signposts, these additional signposts that the fish use as they move on structure, as they migrate on structure. We established they can't see the entire structure because they can't see that far. Even though they see well, they can't see far. So they need these additional features to find their way on their movements towards the shallows and, more importantly, back to their sanctuary zone when the movement and migration is over. And we established that we refer to these features, these additional features, as brakes and brake lines. And we identified and we actually defined what a brake is and what a brake line is. Now today I want to talk about one particular feature which we refer to as a sharper brake. Very, very important in our fishing. Just so you understand what a sharper brake is, let's define it. We talked about and established what a brake line is. It's where we have basically an increase, sometimes a decrease, but most of the time an increase in depth, a rather rapid increase in depth. And if this rapid increase in depth runs for a distance, we refer to it as a brake line. At any rate, so what is a sharper brake? It's a brake line that occurs at just one little spot. And how do we identify this? Well, if you look at a contour map, I'm going to show you a picture right here. We have contour lines going around here, and where these two lines come close together, we have a brake line. Now, at times, you'll be looking at a contour map, and it looks like just a sort of a big flat bar. We don't see any brake lines, and then all of a sudden, those two contour lines right there come real close together and then spread back out again. Well, it's a brake line that's occurring in just one little spot. And that's what we refer to as a sharper brake. Now, when Buck first was telling me about sharper brakes, I said, what makes them so special? Why are you so excited about finding a sharper brake? He said, let me put it to you this way. It's like the fish are down here in deep water, and they're always looking for that signpost to follow, and all of a sudden there's this one spot where this sharper brake occurs. He said it's like a neon sign that's just sitting there flashing, saying, here we go, here I am, Mr. Fish, here I am, right here, right here. He said it's like turning the light on and off for him, right in one little spot. There's no brake line around that. It's just a big broad bar. There's nothing else there. And all of a sudden, here's this light bulb, neon sign. He says that's how they see it. And when they become active and move, they move right to it. Sharper brake. Don't ever forget the importance of a sharper brake. My old partner and I went out there, fished that muskie tournament. The first thing I noticed on a map was a sharper brake occurring where we had good watercolor. It was occurring at a good deep depth. And on the second or third trolling pass we made on that spot, we hit the 30-pound muskie. And over the next 2 days, under horrible weather conditions, we caught 3 more fish over 20 pounds. Every fish came exactly at that spot, the sharper brake. I'm going to show you a picture of it up here. Once I found that sharper brake, we just kept pounding that spot over and over and over for 2 days and caught 4 muskies, when 250 other entrants did not catch one fish. We caught the only fish. All came from the exact same spot, a sharper brake. It's what we call pinpointing our fishing. And if the fish didn't utilize these features in the way that they do, brakes and brake lines, we wouldn't have been able to do that. We wouldn't have been able to pinpoint that spot and keep hitting it over and over and over and over. So knowing what a sharper brake is, knowing what a brake is, knowing what a brake line is, knowing all the different types, once you run into it in your fishing situation, you'll know exactly what to do. But the good news is, the way fish utilize these features allows us to pinpoint where we're fishing for them, where we're going to run into the fish. Not just helter-skelter out anywhere on structure, we're pinpointing our fish. And there's nothing better than a sharper brake. Now let me take this one step further. Sharper break brings me, and this maybe tends to get more into the area of map and interpretation, but let me just mention it right here. It's important that we can establish contact points on structure. And again, I said we talked a lot about that in our on-the-water map and interpretation and in our study on mapping and interpretation. However, contact point, by definition, is the very first break or break line that a fish sees as he begins to make his migration. In other words, you got the fish down here in the deep water channel, you got them in the deep water hole, and when they become active and start to move, the very first thing they see on that structure, the first break that they identify with, that is known as the contact point, where they first make contact with that structure. So as we're moving along in this thing, we've got breaks and we got break lines, we got sharper breaks, we got contact points. They all encompass these little features, these additional features that are on or connected to structure. And I can't even tell you how important they are, that we understand them all, we can identify them all. And many times people will ask me, well, how in the world can I see that rock pile? Or how can I see? Well, with today's graphs, you can pretty much see anything you want to see. Just taking a picture for you. But you got to recognize and know what the heck it is. But a lot of times people say, well, how do I know about this certain little minute feature on this structure that the fish has no trouble seeing, but I can't see it on my depth sign or on my unit? If you're working the structure properly, and this comes under the heading of presentation of lures, you'll be able to feel a lot of these features. When it comes to the break lines, we're going to continue our discussion on break lines as well, where you have a clean bottom versus a muck bottom, where that line of embarkation occurs. You have a break line that runs for a distance. You'll be able to feel it. This is clean, this is mucky. This is clean, hard bottom, this isn't. Where that line exists, it's a break line. Fish can follow along it. It's what Buck referred to as an invisible break line. There's also break lines where you have a temperature change. And Buck referred to that as an invisible break line. Fish can feel it and they move along it. So break lines, a line on structure that runs for a distance that breaks up the uniformity of the structure. And in many cases, as we talked about in our mapping, it's the break line that actually forms the structure. The break line or break lines. A lot of structures have multiple break lines. But we have to just be able to identify, not only identify them, but we have to understand their importance and what it means to us when it comes to actually catching fish, having success, catching fish. That's what we're in this game for, to be successful and catch fish. And I can't say enough about the breaks and the break lines. Sharper breaks, break lines, contact points. We have to learn how to pinpoint our fish, pinpoint these fish on the structure if we want to have consistent success. So with that being said, we're going to talk more about it next time we get together. We're going to have this hard study on breaks and break lines, and I hope that you're doing your review of what we talked about last summer on the 15 different parts of understanding structure and identifying the 17 different types of structure, and then taking a look also at the underwater mapping and interpretation of structure, and then put it together with what we're talking about now, with all the different breaks and break lines we're identifying and what it means to us when we actually get out there on a lake. And you're going to find out what I'm telling you. We're going to be catching more and bigger fish, I guarantee it. So once again, thanks for being with me today. I hope you learned a little something. We're going to be continuing our discussion on breaks and break lines next time we get together. But be sure to continue to review all of our 15-part section on the master class on the 17 different types of structure. And then if you also have a chance and you're not getting too bored with it all, go back and review that mapping and interpretation video that I made back in 1990, whatever the heck it was, at the summer school, where we actually have students going out doing a map and interpretation of structure. We mapped a bar and we also mapped a hump. And I think that's going to help you to understand and really put together what we're talking about now. Put it all together we're going to have a real good understanding of structure, breaks, and break lines, and how it affects the fish and how it affects you and me when it comes to putting those fish on the stringer. So with all that being said, thanks for being with me today, and we'll see you the next time. But before I leave, I want to be sure to encourage you to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to our channel. And thanks again for being with me today. We'll see you the next time.